Alright, so I finally got around to watching Salem's Lot, the newest interpretation of Stephen King's famous novel. And you know what? It's hit or miss. I think this is going to be one of those. Some of you are going to like it, some of you aren't. I thought it was pretty good, although I do have my quarrels with it. There's a lot of good and some bad. I'm going to cover both. I also want your comments down below what you thought of the movie if you saw it. Originally, this was supposed to go into theaters, get a theatrical release. It didn't make it there, went straight to Max. I can kind of see why. Now, if you're not familiar with this particular novel, it is about a nice peaceful town until a vampire moves in and then starts converting everybody, turning it into, well, his own little playground. Now, that being said, I enjoyed this movie in regards to I like the classic Nosferatu type vampire. Alright, that's what we got here. Very old school, very classic. I enjoyed it. I also like the classic lore with the wooden stakes and the crosses, the holy water. All of that, again, classic vampire lore. I feel like that's something we've gotten really far away from with modern movies, and we're all trying to reinvent the wheel when it comes to movie monsters. This is something that just really embraces that. I also like the story behind this, the one vampire moving into town and converting everybody, the simple lore of having to be invited in a house in order to enter. All those things are in this movie, and I think it's great. The kids in this movie were surprisingly good actors. I wish the adults could do the same though. I actually think the kids outshine the adults when it came to acting in this movie. That was one of my biggest issues, is the lack of emotion and the lack of urgency in the movie when it came to the adults. When something happens, they're very blank. Like, oh, okay. There's the door just opened up out of nowhere. But they're very, very cavalier about it. Or light goes out. Something falls. They're not going to get scared. They're not like, oh, what happened? You know, where, you know, what's behind that wall? What's in the dark? You know, there's no sense of fear. So that kind of like surprised me. The kids, on the other hand, I feel like did a much better job with displaying that emotion. So I was kind of disturbed on the level of acting in the movie. Now, I'm not saying that there weren't some scenes that were done really well, but I think we could have used some work there. Now, when it comes to the actors, or should I say the characters, this is another area I wanted more because they were quite interesting. At least the main character, Ben. He was the author, says he was originally from the town. He left, he came back for inspiration. He's the main guy. I want to know more about him. Why did he leave? What happened, you know, in all this? And I feel like the movie was rushed a bit. Like, this was a very, very fast-paced movie. Now, although it was an hour and 53-minute runtime, keeping in mind a Stephen King novel is very large, and most Stephen King movies are extremely long. So this one, in regards to that, was kind of short. And I was left wanting to know more about these characters. Ben and this girl, Susie, he runs into in the beginning. I want to know more about her. I mean, these two characters, I felt left a lot on the table. You know, so I think this movie could have been longer, which is kind of strange for me to say. I'm normally like, you know, I'm not all about the slow burn thing. Let's just get to the action. Let's get to the stuff, get it over with. This one, I really could have dove more into where did the vampire come from? His origins, his moving to the town. You know, some of the other characters in here were kind of interesting, but I didn't get any background. We could have focused more on some of these characters and then slowly brought all the other elements in. Quarrel of mine, I don't know how you feel about that, but I just think there was so much rushed that they could have made this movie really good had they taken a little more time. But there were a lot of really good scenes, a lot of classic vampire fighting, and I say that in like with the holy water and the crosses. I love how the crosses, like when a vampire is near, the cross starts to glow. And I was like, that is really cool. Like you got that emphasis that it's working. So I thought that was really neat. And the whole sunlight aspect, burning them, really, really good. You know, again, classic vampire. But then we have the servant of the vampire. You know, the human who hasn't totally been turned, but he also has some weird powers because he's been compelled and does all the daytime work. I really enjoyed that person. But again, we could have dove more into that character. I want to know where that character came from. I want to know what powers this guy has, because for some reason, it makes me feel like they can do things that they shouldn't be able to do as a human, but they don't explain anything. So I think this movie could have been great, but they skipped over so much and shortcut this movie. It missed out. It's getting like a 50% on Rotten Tomatoes. The critics are giving it like a 50%. Everything across the board is like 50% with this movie. So it's hit or miss, depending on how you look at it. But I think considering all the other Stephen King movies out there, this one doesn't really stack up. But I say that lightly because I still enjoyed it. I enjoyed the movie. I think it was fun as a vampire movie. I don't think it did the novel justice, though. That's the key here. The movie was good, but I think there's a lot in the novel that totally got skipped over. If you've read the novel, let me know how it compares. Drop your comments down below. Hit that like button and subscribe button on your way out, and I'll see you at the concession stands.